Welcome to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show.
Hello and welcome back to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show with Miss Olivia Vizachero. Olivia is the former attorney turned life and business coach for lawyers. She helps ambitious attorneys stop overthinking, set those boundaries, and take bold action so they can build a practice and a life they actually love. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about the cost of overworking. Olivia will walk us through why so many lawyers can't stop hustling and how to break the habit of working nonstop. Olivia, my dear, welcome back.
Thanks so much. How are you, Evan?
I'm well. You know, it's always good to talk to you. And you can get these lawyers, thinking right and moving right and living right and whatnot. But overworking, overworking is almost like worn as a badge of honor. We talked about this in different episodes. Why do you think the profession celebrates being busy and celebrates being burned out?
So I think there's the external and also the internal. So on the internal side, people, especially lawyers, have a desire or need to feel needed or significant. And they use their busyness as a way to feed that need. So if we're trying to overcome this habit of overworking, you really need to dismantle that desire, that need for significance, and to either meet it a different way or recognize the unhealthy way that you are meeting it by being constantly busy. You can do great work and have some balance. You don't have to only feel needed or important or significant by how much you work. You can define that and satisfy that with your contribution and also have some rest. Externally speaking, I think people measure their success by how busy they are. We interpret it as a sign of being in demand. And if you're in demand, then you're doing well, you're successful, you're skilled. We tend to think that way. And we mistake quantity over quality. So if we have lots of work, we think more is better versus more is more. I also think that we wear the suffering as a badge of honor. So the busier you are, the more you're working, the less sleep you're getting. And I used to be guilty of this myself. We wear it like a badge. We treat it like a flex. So we really have to stop thinking about suffering as being morally virtuous. There is no ultimate success. There is no ultimate success indicator just because you're miserable or you're working in an unhealthy manner. So if you want to stop overworking, we need to start by redefining what success means to you or what prestige means to you. When I left Big Law, a lot of people that I worked with, and I went there initially because I was chasing prestige. And you can decide, hey, prestige isn't that important to me anymore, or success isn't that important to me anymore. But I find a much more successful way to go about changing your relationship with work so you can dial down the overworking is by not getting rid of those words, but redefining them. So can you define success in a way that allows you to make a certain amount of money, but also have a life outside of work, or to work a certain amount and serve clients in the way that you want, but also be able to do things you enjoy or spend time with loved ones? Those things ultimately constitute success as well, but only if you decide that they do.
What are some of those subtle signs that a lawyer is overworking, even if they tell themselves they're just kind of dedicated to their craft?
And that is a lie that they tell themselves in order to keep making the same decisions over and over again. So one sign is that nothing changes. They say they're busy. They say they want to work less, but they don't make any different decisions about how they spend their time, what work they take on. And then this also ties into another subtle sign, which is their overcapacity, but they keep taking more work. And this typically happens because people haven't defined what their capacity is. They haven't figured that out. So they'll keep taking more on. And it's like, that's next month's problem to deal with. I'll figure that out down the line. But they'll keep taking more and more, even though they're working fringe hours, they're using weekends, they're staying up late, waking up early. And again, those are other signs of overworking, that you're constantly needing to use fringe hours in order to catch up or stay on top of things. And then this one's subtle, And most people don't really think about this as working, but you're always thinking about work. Most attorneys think if I'm not typing on my keyboard or meeting with a client or in court or doing anything like that, it doesn't actually constitute work. So there's the time, the number of hours each week you spend working. And then there's the time above and beyond that you spend thinking about work. And I really challenge people to use the total number as the amount that they work rather than just the hours they think count, whether that's billable hours or time spent in the office. If you include the time that you think about work, your number's probably going to be a lot higher, and it shows you that your brain's never getting a break.
How does overworking actually backfire? For example, like maybe on the performance, judgment, or even maybe client relationships?
Totally. It manifests and impacts all three of those things. So, number one, you start becoming much more scattered because you're exhausted. You're probably sacrificing sleep in order to stay on top of things, and you become reactive, much less intentional. You're rushing work or dropping the ball, forgetting about things, including a failure to communicate because you're always head down racing up against a deadline because you've taken on more work than you actually have time for. You're also operating so much slower. I used to think that staying up late, waking up early, pulling all-nighters, really pushing the envelope as far as I could on the overworking aspect was beneficial. That meant I was dedicated, that I was still capable of doing really great work. But when I started to actually pay attention, and then once I actually changed my relationship with rest and started to take better care of myself, I could see the difference. And an email that should have taken me 3 minutes because my brain was so tired, it would take me 30 minutes to write that email. And I'd overthink it and I'd struggle to articulate the points that I wanted to make. I wasn't as confident. I wasn't able to work as quickly. And when I was rested and taking better care of myself, those small things, they were so easy to write off and get them done off the to-do list. So if people feel like they're spending a long time on stuff that they shouldn't be, check in with yourself. Are you pushing it a little too hard? Burning the candle at both ends? If you can start to challenge the idea that you do the same quality of work or that it's better for you or your clients to work in this manner, and you can start to make the argument that maybe things could improve if you worked a little less and took better care of yourself, you can start to find evidence that that's actually the case.
You talked about this before, but many attorneys worry about that slowing down means they're actually falling behind. Where does that fear usually come from in your experience?
So sometimes it's a legitimate fear because they've taken on too much work.
Right.
So they actually will fall behind if they slow down and do less. I actually had this conversation with a client yesterday. And I think one of the desires is to make an immediate overnight change. And a lot of times that doesn't meet the moment appropriately. So the conversation I had with the client yesterday, she would really love to work 4 days a week instead of 5. And right now that feels totally impossible to her. And I suggested instead of trying to achieve that in January, the first of the year, what if we made next year the year that we make all the little changes necessary in order to, by the end of the year, get down to a 4-day work week?
Right.
So that's one. The second is that you're unclear on what it even means to be behind. So a lot of people think that being caught up means being done with everything. Having a completely empty to-do list, no work left on your plate, which for most attorneys I know would actually be a worst case scenario. But you need to change the way you think about being done with things. There's always going to be more work to do. That's the nature of this career. It's very much unlike academia. We spend so much time in school where we have a syllabus, we complete items at the end of the semester, we've completed all of the assignments that were given to us, and we get a fresh start and a clean slate with the next semester. Our careers aren't like that. So you want to decide what's enough work for today based on the time you have available and what you can actually achieve. And then you can end the day knowing there will be more to do tomorrow and the day after that and next week and the week following that. So if you get rid of the belief that being behind means there's more work to do, or not being behind means you're done with everything, you can stop overworking because you're chasing that done with everything standard.
How does the billable hour mindset feed into that chronic overwork, even for lawyers who's gone out on their own?
For sure. And I do see this with people who work at firms or work for themselves.
Right.
And part of this stems from the belief that more is better versus more is just more. And people haven't defined what enough is for them in terms of their billable hour targets or the amount of money that they want to make. So this is a part of the overworking equation where math actually comes in handy. So you want to decide for you. Most people pursue growth for the sake of growth without thinking, does this actually make sense for this season of my life, for what I want at work and outside of work, for the quality of life I'd like to enjoy? So we're just always chasing more clients, more money, more billable hours, because again, we're using that as a flex or a badge of honor, a symbol of success. So you don't have to settle for the amount of money that you might make this year or next year forever. But you do want to decide, is this enough for this season, even if I ultimately want to make more? So let's say you're working for yourself and you just keep taking cases because more money is always better. Decide, all right, this year I want to make $400,000. Okay, how much do we need to bill in order to make that? What does the rate need to be and the number of billable hours that I need to bill in order to get there? Could I maybe work a little bit less and increase my rate by $25 this year and work less than I did last year, but still make the same or a little bit more? You can also be thinking more into the future. So that same client I mentioned earlier, we also had this conversation yesterday because she said, well, I want to work 4 days a week, but I don't want to make less money. And I'm like, of course you don't, and nor should you have to. I'm all about working less and figuring out how to not take a pay cut. Right. So her price increase that we talked about for this year, it might not get her to the place where a 4-day work week allows her to make the same or more than she did last year, working 5 days and some weekends. But if we increase it a little bit this year and then a little bit next year and then a little bit the year after, she will be at the place where she can work a 4-day work week and make more than she's made in previous years. So be willing to have it take a little while, but ultimately be working towards that result that you want.
What tends to happen when someone finally takes that break after years of that nonstop effort, and why can that feel so uncomfortable, for them at first?
It absolutely does feel uncomfortable for them. I watch my clients have a very strong reaction when they finally start to slow down. And the first reason for that is because it feels unfamiliar. Most people who struggle with overworking or poor time management habits, they're so used to rushing that just becomes their constant way of experiencing life. So anything different from that feels really weird to them. I promise you'll acclimate. So give yourself some time to adjust and remind yourself that you actually do deserve to go through life in a calm, unrushed manner. I used to be constantly late for the airport. And when I finally decided to work on that and make the changes necessary to be on time and to not miss flights and to have a calm experience, I really paid attention to how does it feel to be in an Uber or a Lyft on the way to the airport and not be worried about whether or not I have enough time? How does it feel to walk through the airport, not worrying if they're going to close the door before I get to the gate? And it feels so calm and not stressful. So it might feel a little weird at first, but it is an enjoyable experience that you are worthy of and deserving of having. Most people also really hate to feel bored, and they associate a lack of overworking or a lack of busyness as boredom. So for a lot of my clients, we have to work on expanding their capacity to feel bored. A lot of people have an addiction to productivity. So they'll tell themselves that if they're not working when they technically could be, that they're being lazy or unproductive, or they think that they need to earn rest and be done with everything before they give themselves permission to have it. And then another thing that might seem kind of silly, but it's actually very common, is people don't make decisions about what to do with that time if they're not going to be working. So you actually need to make decisions about how to spend your off time. A lot of people report to me, Olivia, I can't shut my brain off, and I should be able to. And in the past, I used to try and coach them through it as if we could get to a place where we shut our brains off. And then the more I coached people on it, and the more I thought about myself and what I do to unwind, I realized I don't ever shut my brain off. Our brains are always on. We don't have an off button. So if you don't want to be thinking about work, what you actually need to do is give your brain something else to focus on. So that might be spending time with loved ones, doing an activity. For me, I love to cook. That requires my full focus, or jigsaw puzzles are a really good way for me to unwind. Other people like to read or watch TV. Whatever it is, decide I'm going to transition out of work mode, and this is what I'm going to do instead, so I have something to actively focus on other than work.
So Miss Olivia, for a lawyer listening right now who's exhausted but afraid to ease up, what's one small boundary or change they can make this week to start reclaiming their life and their time?
So this is going to sound really simple and also very uncomfortable for people, but when you're thinking about working less, I always want to start with fringe hours. So fringe hours are evenings, early mornings before you would prefer to actually start working, or the weekends. And we're not going to eliminate all of the fringe hour work if you're someone who always uses it, but instead start small. Decide one small amount of time where you're not going to work and honor it, because you need to create evidence for yourself that A, it's okay for you to not work. B, we want to break the habit of planning to work during fringe hours and then not working because you don't really want to. So your brain doesn't get a break, but you actually don't accomplish anything. And you want to give yourself an opportunity to enjoy that experience. What does it feel like to decide ahead of time, I'm not going to work on Saturdays? Or if that feels too extreme, I'm not going to work on Saturdays from noon until the end of the day. I can do a couple hours in the morning, but I'm not going to work or think about work all day long. Or maybe it's one night a week that you decide I don't work late on Thursday nights. That's date night. And I stop working at 5, and come hell or high water, I honor it. So start there, and then you can expand slowly but surely once you start to create some safety for yourself in working a little bit less.
Amazing. Miss Olivia, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Alrighty, guys, that's it for today's episode of the Less Stressed Lawyer Show. If you're ready to stop overthinking and start making bold moves in your life and your practice, visit oliviavizachero.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with an attorney who might need it. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.